The key turns in the lock, a sound so familiar it's stitched into the fabric of my life, but this time it feels alien, heavy. The door swings inward, and the first thing that hits me isn't the scent of home, the faint lemon polish, the lingering trace of coffee. It's her. Her perfume. Cloying, sweet, utterly foreign, layered over the ghost of our life. My stomach lurches, a cold, hard knot tightening. I step inside, the floorboards groaning a mournful greeting under my feet. It's quiet. Too quiet. The air is thick with tension, a silent scream held in the lungs of the house itself. My eyes scan the living room, the sofa where we watched movies, piled with cushions that aren't mine. A blanket I've never seen. A coffee mug on the table, lipstick on the rim. Her lipstick. Then I see him, standing in the doorway of the bedroom. Our bedroom. He's wearing the gray t-shirt I bought him last Christmas. He looks uncomfortable.
Caught.
And behind him, just visible, is her, sitting up in my bed. My bed. Our bed. The one we picked out together. The one where we mapped out our future, where we whispered secrets in the dark, where we built this life. She's propped against my pillows, looking small and pale, like a trespasser caught in the act. He steps forward, blocking my view of her, putting himself between us, between me and my home, between me and my bed. His voice is low, tight. What are you doing here? My voice is a stranger's. Cold, sharp. What am I doing here? What is she doing here? In my house. In my bed. He flinches, but the discomfort hardens into defiance. A protective stance. For her. In my home. He lowers his voice further, a dangerous edge creeping in. She lives here now. The words hang in the air, heavy and toxic. She lives here now. In the house I built, the life I curated, the bed I slept in. It's not just betrayal. It's an invasion. A complete erasure. He didn't just break our vows. He gave my entire existence to someone else. He gave her my bed. If you've ever felt this kind of shock, this cold, clean slice of betrayal right through the heart of your normal, tell me in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know to know I'm not alone in telling these stories. We had a life. A good life, or so I thought. It wasn't perfect, whose is? There were quiet evenings on the sofa, the rhythm of his breath beside me in bed, the easy comfort of shared history. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was the physical manifestation of our commitment. Every painting on the wall, every book on the shelf, every worn patch on the rug held a memory. We planned renovations, talked about growing old here. It was the foundation. My desires were simple, built around this shared world. Stability, connection, a future unfolding together. I worked hard, contributed equally, nurtured the space we inhabited. I trusted him. Completely. That trust was the invisible mortar holding everything together. The disruption didn't arrive with a bang, but a slow, insidious creep. Late nights at work became more frequent. Distant phone calls he'd taken another room. A subtle withdrawal, a quiet absence even when he was physically present. I attributed it to stress, to the pressures of his job. I tried to be supportive, to create a haven for him at home. I cooked his favorite meals, made sure the house was a place of peace. All the while, the foundation was crumbling, atom by atom, without my knowledge. The day I found out wasn't a sudden revelation. It was the confirmation of a creeping dread I hadn't dared to name. A casual comment from a mutual acquaintance that didn't quite make sense. A look I caught between him and someone else at a work function that lasted a fraction too long, held a fraction too much unspoken. The pieces started to click into place, a horrifying puzzle assembling itself in my mind. Phone bills with unfamiliar numbers called at odd hours. Receipts for gifts I never received. Lies, small at first, then larger, gaping holes in the story of his days. The confrontation was quiet, chillingly so. Not a screaming match, but a slow, unraveling of truth. The air was thick and still, the silence punctuated only by the frantic hammering of my own heart. His eyes, when he finally met them, were cold, distant. No remorse, only a tired resignation, as if I were an obstacle to be dealt with. He admitted it, not with confession, but with curt, brutal efficiency. It had been going on for months. With her. The same her I'd seen tonight. The one now sleeping in my bed. The house that had been my sanctuary suddenly felt like a cage. Or worse, an occupied territory. I couldn't stay. Every corner whispered of his deception. Every object was tainted by his lie. Leaving felt like ripping off my own skin. I grabbed a suitcase, threw in clothes blindly, essentials that suddenly felt utterly meaningless. The weight of his betrayal was a physical burden, pressing down on my chest, stealing my breath. I walked out the door I had walked through countless times with ease, and this time it closed behind me like the final period on a finished sentence. The first few weeks were a blur of disorientation and raw pain. I couch-surfed, relying on the kindness of friends whose worried faces were a constant reminder of the wreckage my life had become. Each morning was a fresh wave of disbelief, the reality hitting me anew with the force of a physical blow. The betrayal wasn't just about him. It was about her, the other woman, now comfortably ensconced in the life I had built. The sheer audacity of it, the complete lack of respect, burned hotter than the initial heartbreak. Legal advice was a cold splash of reality. Divorce. Division of assets. The house. Our house. Jointly owned. Complicated. The lawyer, sharp and professional, laid out the options, the timelines, the costs. It felt clinical, detached, reducing the ruins of my marriage to financial transactions and legal jargon. I felt powerless, adrift in a system that seemed designed to prolong the agony. My attempts to communicate with him were met with a wall of indifference, sometimes outright hostility. He seemed to resent my existence, my claim to any part of the life he was now so eagerly sharing with her. He dragged his feet on providing financial information, made excuses, avoided calls. It was a passive-aggressive war, fought with silence and delay tactics. Meanwhile, I knew she was there, living my life in my space. The thought was a constant, gnawing pain. It fueled a quiet rage that simmered beneath the surface of my despair. Every shared photo I accidentally saw on social media, every rumor that trickled back to me, was like twisting a knife in the wound. He was moving on, building something new, using the foundation of what we had while I was still standing in the rubble. The practical challenges mounted. Finding a place to live that wasn't temporary. Managing finances on my own. Dealing with the shared bills he was slow to address. The emotional toll was immense. Sleepless nights, days filled with a leaden sadness punctuated by flashes of intense anger. Friends offered comfort, but eventually, the world moves on. Their lives were stable, predictable. Mine was a chaotic mess. I felt isolated, consumed by the injustice of it all. He had walked away from our shared reality and immediately stepped into a ready-made alternative, leaving me with nothing but questions and the ghost of a future that would never exist. The house, the symbol of everything, was now a symbol of my dispossession. It felt like he hadn't just left me, he'd erased me. And she was living in the space where I used to be. I remember staring out a window in a rented room that didn't feel like mine. The gray sky mirrored my mood. Everything felt bleak, hopeless. The legal process was slow, draining my meager savings. He was making it difficult, dragging things out, seemingly enjoying the power he held over my financial and emotional state. He was living comfortably, probably laughing about me, while I was counting pennies and living out of boxes. It wasn't just the money or the things. It was the profound unfairness, the feeling that he was getting away with it, that his betrayal had been rewarded with a smooth transition into a new, unburdened life. I felt like a ghost haunting the edges of my own existence. The house was alive with their presence, while my life felt paused, suspended in a state of perpetual uncertainty. I saw pictures she'd posted online, small glimpses into my home, a new vase on my mantelpiece, a different arrangement of furniture in our living room. It was like watching a stranger redecorate the most intimate parts of my soul. The humiliation was crushing. I felt small, defeated. The thought of just walking away, of letting him have it all just to make the pain stop, was a siren song in my darkest moments. What was the point of fighting so hard for things that were now tainted? Maybe he was right. Maybe I should just disappear. The crisis wasn't just external. It was a deep internal erosion of my will to fight. I was losing hope, losing myself in the process. The turning point didn't come in a sudden flash of inspiration, but a slow, steady build-up of cold fury. It was fueled by exhaustion, by the relentless unfairness, by the sheer indignity of my situation. I was talking to my lawyer, reviewing documents, feeling that familiar wave of despair wash over me. She was explaining the complexities of dividing assets, the potential delays, the likelihood of a protracted battle over the house. "It's a joint asset," she said, her voice calm, professional. "Neither party can unilaterally exclude the other from accessing or using it, technically, until a court order is made."
Technically.
The word hung in the air.
Technically.
Accessing or using it. The house. My house. The house he had given to her. An idea began to form, cold and sharp, cutting through the fog of my despair. It wasn't about getting my share of the house value, eventually through the divorce process. It was about the here and now, about his presumption of ownership, of his right to simply replace me and carry on as if I ceased to exist. He had physical possession, but I still had legal right. The technicality. It wasn't about revenge, not exactly. Not just breaking things or causing pain for the sake of it. It was about reclaiming agency. It was about leverage. It was about disrupting his comfortable new reality with the same force he had disrupted mine. He thought he had won the physical space, the comfortable home, the picture-perfect new life. He thought I was out, defeated, waiting for the courts to grant me crumbs. He had focused on the emotional betrayal, the swift replacement, the physical occupation. He had forgotten about the paperwork,
The deeds.
the legal rights that were still very much mine. He saw the house as his to give away. I saw it as a strategic battlefield. The plan formed slowly, meticulously. It wasn't impulsive, it was calculated, cold. It used the very thing he had ignored, my legal standing. It wouldn't just disrupt his life, it would dismantle his sense of security and control in the most effective way possible. He had given her my bed. I would take back the whole bedroom. And then some. The despair hadn't vanished, but it had been sharpened into something else, a quiet, potent determination. I wasn't fighting for emotional closure anymore. I was fighting for a strategic advantage, for a way to make him understand the consequences of his actions not in abstract legal terms, but in the immediate, physical reality of his life. The house wasn't just a home anymore. It was the weapon I would use to turn the tables. I wasn't the victim waiting for justice. I was the claimant coming to collect. And I wouldn't be asking. I would be taking. The day arrived cloaked in a strange, almost surreal calm. The weather was gray and cool, mirroring the steel in my stomach. My lawyer had done her part, confirming my legal right to access the jointly owned property. I wasn't breaking in. I was entering my own home. I had arranged for the movers to meet me there at a specific time. A locksmith, too, just in case he'd changed the locks, another potential legal misstep on his part. And a small, discreet security detail. Not for violence, but presence. To document, to ensure things remained technically legal and orderly, even if the emotional reality was anything but. We arrived precisely on schedule. The van was large, nondescript, parked a little way down the street. I walked up the familiar path to the front door, the one I had walked up thousands of times, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had the key. The original key. I put in the lock. It turned. He hadn't changed them. A small wave of satisfaction washed over me, quickly subsumed by the task at hand. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air still carried the scent of her perfume, but today it smelled like weakness, like complacency. I could hear voices from the living room. Casual. Comfortable. They were there, living their life in my space. My voice, when I spoke, was clear and steady, cutting through their domestic scene like glass. "I'm here to collect some of my belongings. He appeared in the hallway first, followed closely by her. The look on his face was priceless. Confusion, annoyance, then a dawning horror as he registered my presence, my demeanor, the van visible through the open door. He wasn't expecting me. Not like this. He thought I was still reeling, distant, navigating the slow-grinding wheels of the law. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice was sharp, angry. I didn't raise mine. As I said, collecting my belongings. The movers are here. We'll start with the bedroom suite. Her face paled. She looked from me to him, her eyes wide with panic. She was still wearing clothes she must have just woken up in. In my house. In my bed. He stepped forward, blocking my path towards the bedroom. "You can't do this. This is harassment. You can't just walk in here and start taking things." My lawyer's words echoed in my mind. Jointly owned, neither party can unilaterally exclude the other, technically. "Actually," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I can. This is my home too, legally. And everything in it is jointly owned until the divorce decree. I'm simply taking my half, or items equivalent to my half, starting with furniture I specifically paid for or that has sentimental value to me." I glanced at the bedroom door. "Like the bed." His face twisted. Rage contorted his features. "You bitch. You planned this. Did you really think?" I replied softly, taking a step closer, forcing him to either move or touch me, "that you could just give my life away and expect me to do nothing?" The movers, large, quiet men, began to enter the house behind me, their footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. They were professional, expressionless. They had a job to do. Their presence was a physical manifestation of the legal process I had set in motion. They carried dollies, blankets, tools. They were here to dismantle the comfortable facade he had built. He started screaming then. Really screaming. "Get out. Get the hell out of my house. I'll call the police." "Feel free," I said, gesturing towards the security person who had quietly entered behind the movers, standing unobtrusively near the door. "They can confirm my right to be here. And frankly, your reaction is only strengthening my case." His face was crimson. He looked utterly blindsided, enraged, impotent. He had prepared for legal battles fought in courtrooms over months. He hadn't prepared for a physical, immediate reclamation of space and property. He had assumed his physical control of the house was absolute power. He had been wrong. The movers headed towards the bedroom. He tried to stop them, physically blocking the doorway. The security person stepped forward calmly, speaking to him in a low, firm voice, explaining the situation, advising him not to interfere. She was shrinking back, a deer in the headlights, watching her temporary kingdom crumble around her. I walked past him, ignoring his sputtering rage. I entered the bedroom, our bedroom. It was exactly as I had left it, except for her things scattered around. Her clothes in the closet I had emptied, her toiletries on the dresser I had used. And the bed. Our bed, where she now slept. A cold wave washed over me, quickly replaced by a surge of grim satisfaction. This was where it started. This was where the betrayal had taken root, right here in the most intimate space of my life. "Take the bed first," I instructed the movers, my voice steady. "The frame, the mattress, the box spring. Everything." As the movers began to efficiently dismantle the bed, piece by piece, he stormed into the room, followed by her. "Stop it," he yelled, his voice cracking. "That's our bed. You can't take the bed." "It was our bed," I said, watching as they lifted the mattress. "Now it's mine to take. You gave it away once. I'm taking it back." Her eyes were wide, pleading. "Please, you can't. Where will we sleep?" I looked at her, a coldness settling over me that surprised even myself. "That," I said, turning back to watch the movers carry the mattress out the door, "is no longer my problem." We moved systematically through the house. The dining room table and chairs I had inherited from my grandmother. The art on the walls that was mine, collected over years before I even met him. The stereo system. The rug in the living room. Dishes from the kitchen I had bought. books from the shelves that were mine. I wasn't just taking random items, I was taking pieces of my history, my identity that had been absorbed into our shared life. Each item removed was a small victory, a dismantling of the life he had so carelessly discarded and handed over to someone else. His screaming continued, alternating between threats and pleas. He called his own lawyer, who presumably told him he had limited recourse at that exact moment without a specific court order preventing my access or removal of jointly owned property, something he hadn't bothered to secure because he thought he had me beat. He called the police, who arrived, listened calmly to both sides, reviewed the basic documentation I provided, proving joint ownership, and ultimately stated it was a civil matter, a property dispute between divorcing parties, and as long as I wasn't damaging the property or taking things that were definitively his and only his, which were few, they couldn't prevent my access or removal of items. They ensured things remained calm, their presence a silent, official validation of my right to be there. Her panic escalated. She started pleading with him, with me, then with the police, trying to appeal to some sense of fairness that his actions had long since forfeited. She scrambled to gather her own things, stuffing them into bags, her face a mask of disbelief. She had moved into what she thought was a secure, established home, only to find its foundation could be yanked out from under her in hours. The house began to feel hollowed out. Spaces that were once filled with the comforting presence of shared life were now empty rectangles on the floor, blank spots on the walls. The air was thick with the dust kicked up by the movers and the raw, exposed emotion of the scene. His face was a roadmap of fury and humiliation. He had been so smug, so certain of his victory, so casual in his disregard for my existence. This was the consequence. Not a delayed judgment, but an immediate, undeniable disruption of the comfortable reality he had built on the ruins of mine. As the last piece of furniture I intended to take was carried out, a large armchair I loved to read in, I stood in the hallway, looking around at the stripped-down rooms. The ghost of our life was still there, but it felt faint, easily overpowered by the raw, chaotic energy of the past few hours. He stood in the living room, speechless for once, watching the movers load the last items into the van. She was huddled near him, looking lost and exposed. "Consider this," I said, my voice low, cutting through the silence that had fallen. "My deposit." I turned and walked out, leaving the front door standing open behind me, letting the cool, gray air flow into the empty spaces. I didn't look back. The house felt like a tomb now, stripped of the life that had once filled it, haunted by the echoes of his rage and her fear. I had come to collect, not just property, but a measure of control, a visible, undeniable consequence for his actions. He had given away my bed, my home, my life. I had taken back the pieces, leaving him in the stark, empty space he had created. The victory felt cold, hard, and undeniably mine. The van was loaded, the movers quiet and efficient. They drove away, carrying the physical remnants of my former life to a storage unit, a temporary holding place for a future yet uncertain. I drove away too, not to a home, but to a quiet hotel room. The silence there was a stark contrast to the storm I had just weathered. Sitting on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, I felt the adrenaline slowly drain away, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. I had won a battle, a significant one, turning the tables in a way he had never anticipated. The look on his face, that pure, unadulterated shock and rage, was seared into my memory. He had been so confident, so dismissive. He had underestimated me completely. He thought I was passive, broken, easily discarded. He learned in a few short, brutal hours that I was not. I had used the rules of his own world, the cold logic of property and law, to shatter his comfortable illusion. But the victory felt hollowed out. I had my things back, or a portion of them, key pieces that represented my contribution, my history. But they were just things. They sat in a storage unit, disconnected from the life they were part of. The house was legally still mine, jointly, but I didn't want it anymore. It was tainted, a monument to betrayal. The legal fight continued, of course. My move hadn't ended the divorce proceedings, but it had fundamentally shifted the power dynamic. He was now the one displaced, the one scrambling to find a new living arrangement, the one whose carefully constructed new life had been violently disrupted. My lawyer was pleased. I had created significant leverage. Negotiations, she assured me, would be much more favorable now. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to rebuild. Not a home yet, but a semblance of a life. Finding a small apartment, moving the stored items in. Each piece of furniture felt like a memory made tangible, bittersweet, and heavy with the weight of what was lost. The armchair I loved to read in sat in a corner, a silent companion in my new, solitary space. The dining table where we had shared countless meals now hosted my single plate. The rage eventually subsided, replaced by a quiet sadness. Not for him, or for her, but for the future that had been stolen, for the trust that had been annihilated. I had fought fire with fire, used cold calculation to combat his callousness. It felt necessary, vital for my survival and self-respect. I hadn't just wanted to hurt him, I had needed to assert my existence, my claim to the life he tried to erase. The house was eventually sold. The proceeds were divided. It was a final severing, a closing of that chapter. I used my share to buy a small place of my own. A place that was entirely mine, built on a new foundation, untainted by shared history or betrayal. It felt small at first, quiet. But it was safe. Looking back, I see the woman who walked out that door with a suitcase, broken and lost, and the woman who walked back in with movers, cold and determined. The betrayal changed me. It stripped away my naivety, my blind trust. It forced me to find a strength I didn't know I possessed, a willingness to fight for myself, not just for what was fair, but for what was necessary to reclaim my sense of self. He gave away my bed, my home, my life. I took back my power. The things I reclaimed, the furniture, the art, the books, they are more than just objects. They are markers of a life lived, a history that cannot be simply given away or erased. They are also reminders of the cost of building your world on the assumption of someone else's loyalty. You have to know when the foundation is rotten and be willing to tear it down yourself if necessary, to build something new, something stronger, something that is truly, undeniably yours. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever had to fight for something that was undeniably yours, whether it was a physical space or just your peace of mind, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment below. And thank you for being here, for listening. Subscribing truly helps bring more of these stories to life.